Alright, I'm doing a book review on video. Is that even a good idea? If it is, I'll maybe start doing these in my YouTube channel, Pastorjasonanswers. Alright, today I'm reviewing Krish Kandiah's book, God is Stranger, Finding God in Unexpected Places. I don't know if you could see it, but in this cover, which is kind of strange in itself, there's actually an exclamation mark. Yeah, kind of weird, kind of strange. Okay, this is what the book's about. You know those familiar and popular stories and verses of the Bible. They get quoted often, they get used in sermons, and people know them from bedtime stories. Well, there are these other verses that are not highlighted. The ones that are not very appealing. These are the ones that Kandiah talks about. They're unappealing and they're not highlighted not because they're difficult to understand, but because we actually don't like what it says. These are the parts where God is a little bit mean or a lot mean, the parts where children are killed, the verses that you would never use in a bedtime story. Now, not only does he collect these passages and stories, but he says there's a bigger story behind it. It shows the God who is there, the God in the discomforts, even causing them. It shows the God who can't be put into a box, a God who is stranger than we think. Now, first of all, being so well read, I'm kind of embarrassed that I never heard of Krish Kandiah before because he's such a good writer. I mean, he's amazing. This is one of the best books I've read in 3 years. And even from the first chapter, he just draws you in and then you're hooked because he wants to show you something. For example, chapter 2, Abraham. Through Abraham, he shows that, yes, trusting in God is very complicated. That's not what you heard from a 3-point sermon. God is not someone you can put into a box. I mean, there are lots of nuances to these stories that get cut out in sermons. I mean, I'm guilty of doing that myself to make it simple, to make it clear. But if you read the other passages that we kind of ignore or skip over, I mean, they show you a bigger God. And it shows that believing in God actually creates more questions than answers. But is that okay? Okay, and then through Jacob, he shows that God actually hurts us. I mean, on purpose. That he's the actual author of pain in our lives. Why is that? Isn't that strange? He proposes some biblical reasons by showing us the full narrative of Jacob, juxtaposed to our very own real modern situations. And we see that they're not so different. And the God who was strange then may be strange now too. Now, a good teacher like Kandiah doesn't merely point out good observations. He also asks the hard questions, even the questions that we're afraid to ask. Where was God when the bombs were falling on Aleppo, recently? Why did God turn up so late? Too late. Or like in the book of Ruth, God doesn't even show up. That's chapter 5. Or why does God kill a servant named Uzzah who was, trying to study the Ark of the Covenant? He was just trying to help. And yet, God doesn't intervene when a terrorist truck just mows down a crowd in France. Why? Why is God so absent, so distant, or sometimes too late? You could, for the answers, or his answers, you could read the chapters yourself. In a way, each chapter is like a really long 1-point sermon with plenty of related tangents, which itself could be another sermon right there. Each chapter is very detailed and it deals with it relates to our real world circumstances today. It's like the plight of Gideon that he talks about is more relevant today with today's news stories, more relevant today than it was even 20 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Like for example, he likens Gideon's act of destroying a Baal altar to the similarly religiously insensitive act of, say, burning a Quran. A culturally sensitive issue more in our social consciousness today than it was even 10 years ago. And then what he does is he flips the script and it says that act was more like removing anti-graffiti from the church walls than, like aggravating an opposing religion. Now, these strange and unhighlighted sections of the Bible show that these are not cookie-cutter bedtime stories filled with heroic characters, but these were real situations. And these heroes were also real people. And if we know real people are not perfect, far from perfect. And David, Moses, Abraham, these were people with faults, much like our own. And the Bible shows these uncomfortable stories of sick sins, or just like, wow, I can't believe these heroes of the faith did that. But yeah, it happened because these were real people and these were real situations, not just made up bedtime stories that someone could just write up. And yes, maybe we've judged them harder or skipped those uncomfortable stories because we've put them on a pedestal. But you won't blame a friend who has similar displays of bipolar emotions. This honesty of the Bible shows us authentic humanity across the spectrum of human experience. For me, chapter 7 wasn't as interesting because of its changed perspective. There's only a little bit of the notion of Isaiah encountering this strange God. The bulk of the chapter is more like a long sermon that's a little disconnected from the theme of the book. However, Isaiah also includes some teachings on how this strange God deals with people and how we should deal with strangers. He ends the chapter by saying that when we open up our hearts to strangers, we actually open up our heart to God. Now, I thought that might be just a minor note in the book, but apparently it takes up the whole chapter. Not just that, it's actually the overarching theme of the entire book, being, he says, the litmus test of the Christian confession, or he says, or the litmus test of authentic discipleship. It is the thing that shows our faith to be genuine. Our response to the needy, he says, that's what it is. Now, I would disagree with that, but he really does build up a really strong case as the book continues. And he adds that this is the way Christianity will win a hearing for the gospel, especially in today's global community. Like I said, this book is awesome, the best I've read in 3 years. And if there's one criticism, he does overuse the term turn up. God turns up, or this turns up. Maybe that's just his way of speaking. But it got real old real fast. I would love to read a hypothetical God is Stranger Part 2 with more insights into these unhighlighted passages of the Bible. I love his insights. But alas, that's not the point of his book. And actually, he selects these specific examples to highlight his own agenda, to teach that a Christianity that follows the real God loves and actively helps the refugees and strangers in this world. In the end, he shows that this stranger God gives us a greater understanding of who God really is and his relation to the world. And it's not that he is so strange and so different from what we want him to be or expect him to be. It's actually that we have been the strangers all along. And this is Pastor Jason with an honest, critical book review. Thanks for watching. This book just came out. If doing a book review on the video YouTube is a good idea, let me know. If it's a bad idea, let me know. And if you want to read my other reviews, they're on my website, wordandtestimony.com.